You are listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul. Our theme music is a clip of Summer Nights by the Eric Jones Trio. It's provided by our friend Mark Chesanout, who plays with the Eric Jones Trio every Thursday and Sunday at Good Times Jazz Bar downtown.
Hey everyone, this is Tamara. Before the show starts, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. Starting this month, we are going to be doing our show on the first and third Wednesdays of the month instead of every single Wednesday. We want to continue to be able to bring you as high a quality show as possible, and this is just going to work out a lot better for our workloads and schedule. So we have our show today, Wednesday the 7th, and then the next show is going to be Wednesday the 21st. So every month it'll be the first and third Wednesdays, and on months that have more weeks, we will also be on the 5th Wednesday. And our artist this week, I kind of forgot during the interview to give a little reading of his bio. So this is Paul Downs, and he's a self-taught artist who enjoys experimenting with multiple styles and mediums. He works with oil, acrylic, and watercolor, as well as graphite. He lives in the Richmond Hill area and participates in multiple local art shows every year. He's on the board of Arts on the Coast, and he's also a member of the Savannah Art Association downtown. So without further ado, here is Paul Downs. Hey everyone, welcome to Arts on the Air. This is Tamara Garvey, and I have the pleasure of sitting with Paul Downs this week. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, thanks.
So good to have you. Well, let's just dive right in. You are from California, right?
At one point, yes.
Okay.
It's been,
the earliest point?
Earliest
Third
point.
birth point?
That would have been high school and some college and in Southern California. My sister still lives out in LA.
Okay. And I saw on your website, it says at college you studied illustration and graphic design. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was the original plan. However, coming out of school, there was a contraction in the economy in the area, and I was putting myself through school and retail and sales and merchandising, and just kept doing that and had art as a side thing, as a second life.
What year was that?
Oh, that's quite a bit ago.
Okay.
That is
you mentioned the economy, so I'm trying to
late 80s, early 90s.
Okay, and then how did you make your way from California to Savannah?
So I first made my way from California to the Seattle area because a friend of mine was in the Navy. And he was like, "Hey, you should come up here and check it out."
Oh.
And
was that in the 90s?
Yeah, about 93. I moved
the
up to
amazing time
Seattle.
to live in Seattle.
To be in Seattle and someone go, so we're gonna go see this little local band, and you go to see this little local band, and the local band happens to have an extra singer they invite on stage, and they're like going, well, we're gonna bring Chris Cornell up from the audience.
Wow.
He's gonna sing for us, or suddenly Eddie Vedder shows up from Pearl Jam.
Yeah, that's amazing.
There was a ton of great music during that time period.
I guess it would just, as you were saying that you were in college in the late 80s, and then someone invited you to Seattle, and I got very excited because I was in high school during the 90s, and just the music was just so iconic. So
yeah, it was just stunning. And the local rock station there would do these what they call paint in the grass shows, where they would introduce bands that were kind of up and coming. So sometimes you would get to sit, and it was a free show. So basically, it's just that open grass area,
wow.
And you could just sit out there for nothing, and you'd be introduced to we're going to introduce this brand new band called Wolfmother that no one's heard of yet.
Did people kind of know? Was there a feeling that the whole grunge thing was going to become really big? Or
I think
surprised?
there might have been some inkling of that because it was becoming a thing. And I mean, and goodness, when you start noticing that there's a lot of flannel and Doc Martens being worn in Wichita, you're thinking, maybe this is stretching out and becoming a thing.
That's amazing that you were there for this entire just cultural movement, the movies coming out. I remember Singles was so huge, and it was just that whole Seattle scene. It's so wild that you were there during the
and I still every once in a while there's a Pearl Jam tune, State of Love and Trust, that's off that album. That I was like going, okay, I'm gonna listen to this and embrace my inner grunge from years ago. So
So you were in your 20s then when you lived there?
Yeah, so I moved up there when I was about 25.
Yeah, that must have been really fun.
Yeah, it was. And then I ended up meeting my wife, the retail store I ended up working at. I ended up going to work for a different retail store, and they introduced me to Shelley, and because she was running her store, and I was like going, well, how do you fast track through the whole management thing? Because I was just doing art really, really part-time on the side.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, let's talk to Shelly. She did store openings and all that. And then I ended up working for her at one point, and then took over my own store, and then we started spending time together. And as soon as we had our first child, then all her family's in the Southeast, so they were like, oh, it'd be great if we could host the grandchild.
Oh, okay.
And that precipitated me
it.
interviewing. So I was interviewing about 20 years ago, between Atlanta and Savannah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that brought me here.
Did you guys ever live in Atlanta, or you just came straight here?
No, just visited. I was interviewing for 2 different jobs, one in Savannah, one in Atlanta.
Okay.
The Savannah job was one where I could use my previous retail experience working for a home office, which meant I suddenly, when you move from retail into like an office job, you suddenly go, oh, this is why people get excited about Friday afternoons and Saturdays and weekends.
Yeah.
Because
there's an actual difference in the days of the week.
It's just another day when you're working retail stuff.
So what year was that you arrived in Savannah?
Oh, that would have been 20 years ago.
Okay.
So 2002.
Okay.
I think I'm artist here, so math.
So you're here. I always think it's so interesting to talk to when people who've lived in Savannah for many years, because you were here sort of like at the height of the Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil craze, and like downtown was just really transitioning. Before that, it had been very empty and desolate, and then it became it was starting to get more touristy, and SCAD was becoming more of a thing.
Well, I think it was a culmination of like SCAD, and I think it's always cool to think, oh, you wouldn't, if you're attending SCAD and you're going to college, you're not going to the campus. Your campus is downtown.
Yeah,
Savannah,
it's
which is
an urban campus.
Very, very cool. But yeah, I saw a lot of the changes and shifts, and it's been nice to see. And I've enjoyed it. And the art community is really super welcoming. I mean, so many creatives I got to know and be friends with when I moved here.
So when you first moved here, I know you live in Richmond Hill now. Mm-hmm. Did you?
That's where we started.
Okay.
We moved to Richmond Hill because
you've been in Richmond Hill the whole time.
At the time we moved, my oldest was 2, so we went, okay, well, school's pace of life, and he's going to be in school in 2 to 3 years. So that was kind of the intent.
So would you guys ever, say you live in Richmond Hill at that era, do you come downtown to go to like a museum or a a particular restaurant? Or what would that be like?
We would come down to museums
like the
and Telfair and having a little. I have 2 boys, and there's just a little thing about boys and trains. So train museum was
you went there a lot.
Annual pass for the
so
train
funny.
museum.
Yeah.
So gotta take them.
Just built-in entertainment for
the youngest
boys.
Was hoping that one of the trains would be done up like Thomas the Tank Engine at some point.
That's cute.
But yeah.
Were the horse-drawn carriages around?
Yeah, they were there. The horse-drawn carriages were around. And when at the retail office I worked at was actually downtown at the time, and so I would wander around on my lunch breaks all around downtown, go to City Market, and at the time I briefly was part of Savannah Art Association when they had their gallery space was Belford's.
Oh, I never knew that they were. Okay, I was only familiar with their space on that square where Gallery Espresso is.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they hadn't always been there.
Yeah, no, they were
above Belford's.
They were there, and then work got to be too busy, so I couldn't commit to sitting in the gallery and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I got in with Arts on the Coast in Richmond Hill when they first started opening up, and I've been with them I serve on the board with them out in Richmond Hill.
Did you think with City Market then, was it just more bustling as far as art? Like now it seems a lot more pitched to bars and restaurants.
It does seem, because there's a couple of places that were co-op galleries. I mean, there's still all the artist space that are there, but that shifted and changed. Yeah. But I mean, the staples are still there. Like, I can't think of the one that's across the way, but there's the Signature Gallery was there at the time. A.T. Hun has been kind of like a staple of that. And the gentleman that's downstairs and does these amazing acrylic paintings, he was there.
Maybe Brian McGregor?
Brian McGregor. I remember seeing his stuff for the first time at A.T. Hun.
Oh, okay, cool.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if people don't go walk around City Market much, there are a few kind of flagship, like very big spaces that are full of different artists. Yeah. Okay, so you said at the time you were doing kind of painting on the side just for fun.
Yeah, did some small commissions here and there.
Were you?
Yeah.
How did you, so at what year did you kind of transition into just doing it more and more and doing shows?
Well, my commitment with Arts on the Coast got me to doing more shows with them, and when they would do themed shows, then of course that's an impetus to, got to get some work done, that begets a few more commissions.
Yeah.
And I think I started doing like the outdoor shows I do more now. That was pretty much post-COVID.
Oh, it's been really recent.
That's been really recent, yeah.
Okay.
Because the job I'd had for like 10 years, like a lot of stuff changed during COVID. I was thanked for my service with the company, given a severance package, which was awesome.
Wow.
But that allowed me a bit of time to kind of reassess things.
Okay.
But the day they told me...
that real classic COVID experience of having a lot of time to...
Yeah, well, and it was
transition
weird
to
too
something.
because I'd set up my Etsy shop in November the year before, in 2019, and the only thing I think I'd sold maybe a calendar to my sister, she was my first customer, and nothing had happened with it. And then it's the day they tell me, oh, Wednesday next week will be your last day.
Wow.
Then I get suddenly a couple of sales pop up on my Etsy shop. And then someone messaged me, it's like, oh, hey, you did the great watercolor dog portraits. Are you still doing those? I am. And I've done probably 50 watercolor dog portraits since like May of 2020.
Wow, so that just like exploded for you.
Yeah, and I just started doing more work, more commission stuff.
I would meet you. I feel like we would see each other a bunch. It was before COVID when I would go to openings at either like Location Gallery or Sulphur Studios.
Yeah.
Were you starting to have work in their group shows there?
I think I did 1 or 2 shows at Location Gallery.
Yeah.
And I think I attended, maybe 1 or 2 at Sulphur.
Okay.
But until because my youngest is 14, my oldest is now 21. So until the youngest got to be a little older, then that kind of inhibited how far
you really couldn't
we
do
were
that
gonna,
much.
Yeah.
So for like a number of years, you were just kind of chipping away in your spare time doing some
And
paintings.
I think in hindsight, looking back at it, it was chipping away and making a body of work.
Yeah.
So when I finally did my Etsy shop and started adding pieces, I easily had 100+ images of different work to add.
Okay.
Because I'd had so much stuff, and I always keep high resolution photos of all the commissions I've done, with the other work I would sell.
So you could sell them as originals and then as prints as well.
Yeah.
How did you, when you started making prints, were you getting them printed somewhere or were you doing them yourself?
Because I was going to do the Etsy shop, I wanted to not have to wait on a printer to ship me things. So I started I talked to a couple of fellow artists, and they made some suggestions on what to get for printers.
Nice
and I kind of settled on I think it's like a Canon Pro 10 I've got. So it's G-Clay quality, it's dye-based inks. And it prints up to 13 by 19.
Oh, that's good. That's very big.
So I can do like little. So generally when I do shows, it's 8.5 by 11 size. 13 by 19 is my largest. Then I've got like an either 11 by 14 or 11 by 17, depending upon how long the actual original piece
the image was. Yeah. I did that too when I very first started doing prints, and I was selling on Etsy, and I was going to it's so funny to think about where you started. I was going to either the Office Depot or the Staples here in town, in Southside, and getting things printed where you'd email them files and they'd print it out on their cardstock, or I had like a little zip drive. So
you're walking in with like a little flash drive.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to give it to them,
and
they'd plug it in and make you a few prints. But really quickly you get to learn. You don't have any control of the colors, and you are at the mercy of how busy they are. And just buying a printer really opens it up where you can just be at home doing it anytime you need.
And I had graphic design and computer stuff. I was the guy that ended up being like tech person in the office I worked for.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's like going, oh, what's this new system they rolled out, or oh hey, how do I make this formula right in this Excel? And I was always I was that person in the office. So I wanted to kind of control the means of production and have that. So that I could,
and you were able to tweak the colors and do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So to the point that to this day I still have like 3 sticky notes that are taped to the top of my printer that are like going, if I'm using this paper, this is the setting, this is how I should have it, so I don't have to remember all of that. Yeah, I've got the profiles all set up for it.
Did you? So that's interesting. When you were in school, and you said it was the late '80s, was there Photoshop? Was that a program or what?
No. So when I was I took graphic design, and that was pretty much all old-fashioned kind of. You're doing vellum. You had like marker airbrushes for some fast comprehensives. They started the school that I was going to. They were starting a computer graphics class, and that was one of the evenings. And I had a guy that was taking graphic design with me, and he goes, "Yeah, someone in there was saying there's some guy named Lassiter that thinks he's going to start a company named Pixar, and he can make an animated film on a computer. I think the guy's nuts." Yeah.
That conversation happened.
Yeah. And they're like going, yeah, okay, well, Sure.
Incredible.
The hindsight. But this is Southern California, so you know, there's a lot. The movie industry is so close to
Who
things.
knows how many proto-famous people you happen to be near, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know of too many, but
I guess there's that, and then you were in a crowd with Chris Cornell once. So those are your two claims of fame.
That was very, very, not like I was shaking hands with Chris or anything like that. I mean, I wasn't meeting these people. Admiration from a distance in the audience. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Amazing. Okay, so let's see. You said that you've gotten a lot of watercolor dog commissions.
Yeah.
Is that, how do you decide, like what percentage of your work right now is sort of just you deciding anything to do fine art versus a commission for someone else?
Well, because the art is the mainstay of, I have a couple of side things that I do also that I'm involved in, but the art is the main thing, so it's a lot of commission work. But I try to squeeze, I'm usually working on multiple pieces at the same time.
Okay.
So like right now I've got 2 canvases that are not dog related, 4 dog commissions, a cat commission.
Oh, that's a lot.
And then I've got some personal works that I'm working on and things like that. As well as also I had to take some time to do a demo before I had my watercolor class.
Oh yeah, we'll talk
Wednesday.
about the teaching.
Yeah.
Do you have a dedicated space in your house?
Yeah, the house I've got has it's got all the main bedrooms are all upstairs, and there was a office, kind of sort of office, wood flooring that's downstairs with a little half bath right next to it off the kitchen.
Yeah.
So that became my studio space. It's got window that I can pull up the blinds. I can look out on my yard and garden.
And you're the bathroom, so you have a sink that you can get messy
got a
with paint
sink.
if you need to.
Yeah, plus I mean the kitchen's like might be 15 feet away, so
it's distracting.
It's not like
the
it's
kitchen
that
right
too
there.
far. Yeah, but it's I mean I've got a drawing table, 2 easels, my printer's in there. Then I've got a large desk from IKEA that I've got my computer on.
Cool.
And I can do my watercolors on that, or the drawing table, and like floor to ceiling IKEA bookshelves for all my reference and geeky toys and stuff like that.
So you like juggling multiple things at the same, you said you're working on some pet commissions and some personal projects.
Yeah. I don't really get artist's block too much, and I remember there was an interview with director Guillermo del Toro years ago, and he was saying how, you know, he really doesn't feel like he gets stuck. He just moves on to the next project because maybe this just needs time to process.
Do you ever have, I feel like I have this happen every so often where a particular painting is like just not that enjoyable to work on. For some reason it's kind of frustrating, and I know I'll finish it someday, but it feels like work doing it, and so I'll set it aside and do other things in the meantime and like kind of keep chipping away at it, that one, and then I'll finally finish it and feel just so relieved that it's done or whatever.
Well, do you ever have the one, because I'll sometimes have it where I get to a piece I've set aside that I just feel like it's like a nut you just can't crack.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you come back to it fresh, and it could be a day or it could be like a year, and you suddenly look at it and go, oh, I know exactly what I need to do with this thing. Now I know what's wrong with this.
Then it's just a matter of physically being able to do it.
I think the big thing is carving out time. I had someone talk to me at a show recently, and they're like, oh, so, you know, you paint when inspiration. I'm like, no, this is a job. You need to kind of engage the machine and work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can be more in the mood to create certain things, but as far as making art, you sit down and you just do it.
Is it every morning you sit down and you do it for a certain number of hours?
Every morning I'm doing something. So when I'm waking up and having the whatever morning beverage that's hot, it's I'm usually either sketching, or I'll do like watercolor bookmarks, or I'll just chip at like watercolor some of the dog portraits that I'm working on, or touch the painting. So it varies a bit.
Yeah, just something related
but something,
to your art business.
I think there's every day though I'm touching something.
Yeah.
And I've always, like my bag that's in my car, I've got my sketchbook in that, so I've always got something with me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Are you you're a sketchbook person? Do you?
Oh, I'm a big sketchbook person. Yeah. I
just
mean,
like sitting. You're sitting. And
I'll
you
sit
have
out.
inspired.
I'll sit there and doodle. It's where I work out ideas, because I did this little. We did holiday cards for the last class of my watercolor class, and one of them I actually decided I want to make like a little yeti design where it's dragging a Christmas tree.
Oh,
so it's
cute.
kind of illustrative and cartoony.
Yeah.
But I went through like 5 or 6 different face sketches to like, how close do I want to put the eyes? How cute do I want to make it? I don't want it to be threatening. This one doesn't quite look like a yeti. It looks like an extra alien from Star Wars. That's not right.
That's interesting. What do you come up with eyes wise to make it look cuter and less threatening?
The eyes, actually, I pulled them. The head I made more kind of oval, horizontal oval,
Okay.
and then I pulled the eyes further apart.
Okay.
And then made the mouth closer to where the eyes are, so there's
That
like
was
almost
cuter.
no news. Yeah, so it's kind of
right.
it's kind of a cute element to
Keep
it.
an eye out. It sounds like, so that'll be in your Etsy shop, right? Your holiday cards.
The probably my Etsy shop. At the moment, I just printed the cards, and they'll be at my my next couple of shows that I do. Like
Okay.
I'm gonna be at the Richmond Hill Farmers Market on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, and that brings me, I did want to talk about just the content of your paintings. I was looking through your site, and you have like a lot of different content. You tend to do landscapes with maybe a figure in them. You do a lot of low country landscapes. You do a lot of animals, and then the kind of background around it is really soft and abstract, which I like. And then you have a whole series of sort of nude figure drawings.
Yeah.
Those, are you going to is there sort of a figure drawing class or session or something that you go to for those?
No, actually, I've always liked the human figure, and there was a few years back, I started bringing my bookmarks into Anderson Mercantile in Richmond Hill,
Okay.
and she had made the comment that she's like, oh, I really like your figurative work, and I really like, and her husband and her really like pinup work. Do you want to try and do like some little like tasteful nudes and bookmarks, and we'll see how we do? And then from there, I did those. Then I started doing, well, let's do them a little bit larger than a 2-inch by 9-inch watercolor strip. So I did these 5x7 like postcard size. And that sort of became a series of different nude figures that I would sketch out, and some of them go faster, some of them go don't take as much time.
Yeah, that's interesting that initially it was for a commission for a shop.
Yeah, but she was like, "Oh, bring this stuff in." And
Okay, so if anybody wants nude figure bookmarks, they should go to Anderson Mercantile. Is that what you said?
If she has any right now,
Okay.
a lot of what she has popular, she goes, "Bring me the weird stuff." So if I did a rendition of like my version of Wednesday Addams, where it says something like socially distant on it, or I've done like some of my versions of like some Studio Ghibli characters, or just like one of the ones I did for Halloween that became a regular staple of my bookmarks was this little cartoonish voodoo doll with like one button eye and a little stitched on heart. It's got pins in it, and on the bookmark it says "Thinking of You."
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this would be fun
It's a
for
little dark.
Halloween.
Yeah,
and then,
in what way are we thinking?
Then kept selling it and selling some more. And now I regularly repaint this thing for.
Thinking of you and stabbing my voodoo doll. I love it.
Yeah, it feels like it should be thinking of you.
Do you find, are the bookmarks, are they original art or are they prints?
They're original art, yeah.
Okay.
They're all like little 2-inch by 9-inch strips of watercolor
So is that
paper.
hard, like for pricing? Because depending on the product, it's like what people's perception of how much they should be paying for a certain thing. It's like you can only charge so much for a bookmark, even if it's an original painting. So how does that work out for you as far as pricing?
I mean, I've been charging like $15 for the bookmarks, and some of them, and I think it averages out. Some of them take a little longer, but others, I mean, if I'm doing like a little watercolor whale, that's done with like a 12-inch brush and 2 colors. I'm using indigo and white, and that's it. And it's kind of the sweeping gesture with the brush to kind of get the shape, and then you add the details with a lot of water. So I mean, that could be done in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, so you worked out, you can kind of do a batch of them.
Yeah, so I'll usually batch them out. I'll usually have like 6 or 7 different ones. It's almost like this artistic version of free association, where you're just like, oh, it's going to be a seahorse, it's going to be a whale, it's going to be those little Kodama figures from like Princess Mononoke that are in the forest, just random stuff that I'll do.
Do you usually paint in water-based media so that it dries quicker, you think?
I guess I do, actually, because I do the oil paints I use are the water miscible oil paints.
Okay.
Because when I first started doing oil painting, I was in like a little 1-bedroom apartment when my oldest was a baby, and my wife's really sensitive to smells, so it's like, oh yeah, I don't really want to cook my wife or baby's brain with odorless thinner. So I found the water miscible ones. And
this conversation about
those.
oil paint has come up with a lot of different people.
And I like the effect. It has enough open time so I can get some good blending, but it dries within a few days.
Okay.
But then I also work in acrylic if I want to do heavy, chunky layers of stuff, and I'll mix them up too.
Yeah, so if you're doing kind of a larger canvas that's more of a completed painting, like either a figure or an animal with, the landscape around it, are you kind of just balancing out both the oil paint and the acrylic?
Some of it depends upon time.
Yeah.
So if I'm on a hard deadline and I want to get some nice gradations of color with the oil paint, I'll do most of it in acrylic as like a massive underpainting, and then do the details in oil where I get the soft blending.
Yeah.
If I have more time, a lot of my larger landscapes, those are pretty much all done in oil.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the backgrounds of your pieces, like, they have this really wispy, soft feel that looks like chalk pastels almost.
I like the soft blending of all of that.
They're very soft.
Stuff.
It's amazing. Yeah. And then the other thing I noticed in your landscapes, they all are like the sky. All of them seem to have this like very dramatic feel where it looks like you're capturing a moment of the sky really changing, like a big wind is coming and the clouds are moving. They just all have this feel to them. It's really interesting.
I like, as one of my fellow artists pointed out, she's like, you really like the movement in your stuff, and it's a more static piece, you end up throwing something in, because I have this more static painting that just went up at a show that we have a wall for Arts on the Coast at Great Oaks Bank in Richmond Hill, and it's basically like a little marsh and a little oak tree with moss and water, and when I finished it, I went, I need to throw a little dragonfly sort of buzzing in the foreground across, because I need that like it was
movement. Just making you crazy that everything in there was static. It's
a little too static, so I like movement and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to talk about, you mentioned, so you live in Richmond Hill, and the big sort of arts association out there is Arts on the Coast.
Yeah.
Did that develop in the years that you've been living there?
I mean, they first started out, I first knew about them a few years after I moved there, and they were subletting a tiny little gallery space in a strip center from another business that had just this sort of like it was like a foyer section that they weren't using, that got used.
Was it like a group of artists?
It was a group of artists that started, and that got started way before I was ever involved. I was in that inception because Joy Dunnigan was part of that, and artist Sarah Volker, and there was late Lily London. She was one of the earlier people, and there was a whole group, and I'm leaving artists out, and my apologies ahead of time for who I'm not mentioning in this. But and then I kind of joined them later on, and then the last few years I'd actually joined the board and was more active.
Okay.
And we have there's an old Henry Ford era bakery that has become like the Welcome Center in Richmond Hill, and that actually has Arts on the Coast gallery inside there, and studio space, and studio space is where I give classes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's like the welcome center for the town, basically. There's a bakery and then the gallery there. That's nice. So I guess you get a lot of people coming through. Yeah,
it was, and they've still got, because it's just the welcome center, so it's rack cards and some Richmond Hill centric merchandise, but they've got the an old industrial sized mixer that the baker had used in Henry Ford's time. It's still there. It's got the original like reddish clay tile floors and all that, but it's been retrofitted and redone.
I don't know, so I will admit I don't know that much about Richmond Hill. I just sort of know it as a suburb of Savannah, which I'm sure is wrong, but it sounds like things to go there and do and see, and a whole history of it.
Yeah, there is. There's a whole history. As I also work with the Historical Society in Richmond Hill, and work with the museum that's in Richmond Hill, and it's this whole. That would be a whole other conversation of length about the history of that. But yeah, there's a ton of artists in the area. But I mean, Savannah, this area is kind of full of them, and I always think there's usually more creatives than we realize. There was a story from a guy years ago that I remember that was on NPR, and he was a writer. He'd sold his first novel, and I'm paraphrasing the story horribly, and essentially I guess he got an advance for a second novel. He was in the insurance business, so he's basically, his work job was a Dilbert cartoon. It's cubicle world.
Yeah.
And so when he got the advance for the second novel, he got with his spouse and was like, well, can I be a full-time writer now? Like, yeah, we can make this work, put my job in the advance, and we can do this. So he's going to leave the job. The day he's having his going away party, he realized that entire time he was sitting next to poets, graphic designers, painters, musicians, actors, playwrights, that were all shaking his hand, going, "You made it out, man! You're doing the creative life."
It's the dream, yeah.
And he had no clue there was this many kind of creators that were quietly doing their thing
Yeah.
on the side.
Oh, if only they'd talked about it around the water cooler.
Yeah, exactly. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, thank you. So we are going to take a little break. I'm here with Paul Downs, and we will be right back.
You are listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
Trees are one of Chatham County's most treasured natural resources. Beyond their beauty and cultural significance, the impact of trees are far-reaching and compounding, spanning from economic benefits to health improvements to climate change resilience. Trees are woven into every aspect of our lives. Savannah Tree Foundation protects and grows Chatham County's urban forest through tree planting, community engagement, and advocacy. More information is available at savannahtree.org. This portion of WRUU's programming is brought to you by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have online ordering and curbside delivery available, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming, and it doesn't just mean that we're a voice for the community. It also means that we're counting on the community to keep us going, and you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Arts on the Air. I'm Tamara Garvey, and I'm sitting with artist Paul Downs. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, so you transitioned, you said, during COVID to doing art as basically your main job, and that involves lots of different income streams, I think they call it. So I know you're doing a lot of in-person shows, you have work up at various shops and galleries, you do commission work as well. So you have a regular thing at the Richmond Hill Farmers Market, right? An in-person show?
Yeah, until the season's over with. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm part of the committee that helped kind of start that up.
Oh.
Because we're like, oh, well, there used to be a farmer's market in town. It'd be great if we could start this back up again. So there was almost like an 8 or 9 months process before we had our very first farmer's market on the last Saturday in April this year.
Okay.
So we're really, really new to that. But yeah, so I do that regularly if I'm not doing other shows.
So there are a few different artists who sell there, or how? What
There's
is the balance of food versus
It's
goods?
we're leaning more towards food items. There's a lot of baked goods. I'm not even going to try to name all the vendors because then I'm going to forget one of them, and I do not want to forget one accidentally. But yeah, you'll have produce, you'll have baked goods, you'll have hot sauce, you'll also have people that are doing like ceramic work, and you'll have people that are doing like handmade leather work, and a few visual artists there.
Cool. So it's a balance of arts and crafts and food.
Kind of a balance of arts and crafts.
That's nice.
I've done a couple of shows before, so some of the vendors I've met at a previous show before.
And then I know you did the recent Slam show the other weekend.
Yes, yeah.
Was it, so how many in-person shows that involve having like a tent and everything? When did you start doing that since COVID?
After COVID had happened.
Okay.
My first one actually was one of my advertising clients was it was a one-person agency, and she messaged me and says, hey, would you be interested in doing like outdoor shows? I can connect you with a person, and obviously it's up to them to approve you, but if you're interested, we do a show once a month in Hilton Head. And so she connected me with that, and that was my first one, so I bought my first tent for that one, figured out how to set it up.
Yeah.
Realized that I need weights if the wind starts to blow.
Yeah, diving in. I mean, our outdoor shows is a whole so much extra headache.
Yeah.
So that's amazing that you started out with that and not an indoor thing where you just have a table.
Yeah.
Okay, so Hilton Head, did you know much about clientele at Hilton Head, or what?
I had worked in my past life doing advertising work. I had spent probably about a half to 3/4 of my time was in the Bluffton Hilton Head Beaufort market for that job. Okay. So I was out there regularly, so I kind of got a sense of the clientele.
Yeah.
But in an advertising capacity is different than a art capacity, so there's always a tweaking. But in some cases, I never know what's going to sell. I brought older pieces that I thought, I want to fill space with this one because I want to have my tent fill. And someone will walk up and it's like, oh, this is perfect. I have to have this. I'm thinking like, where were you like 5 years ago when I painted this thing for the first time? Or other things I just painted that week and it sells. So you don't. You really can't tell on that.
So
stuff.
you bring originals to that?
Yeah, I'll bring originals. I bring prints of my work. I'll bring my watercolor bookmarks, some of my small 5x7s.
What is the name of that art fair?
That's at the shops at Sea Pines, and it's the first Thursday art market.
Once a month. Okay.
So yeah, first Thursdays of every month.
What was your set? So you had to buy a tent for that.
Bought a tent.
How much planning and researching did you do as far as how to set up your booth?
I had gone to a couple. My wife and I actually, when we got accepted to possibly do it, I didn't start until I said, well, let me not start this next one, but let me start the following month. And we actually went there to walk around, take a look at the setup. In general, I mean, I think some of the best advice I've ever gotten is from other vendors at shows that are really generous in their kind of experience and kind of go, hey, what worked for me was this. And it's like the tent that I now have is not the tent I started with, but that tent that I have was because there was a photographer that told me, oh, I went to this site and this is the tent I bought because it came with the walls, but here's what you want to do. Go to the refurbished section because it's going to get dirty anyway and you get the tent for like half and it's still covered by the warranties.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, great, because I did a weekend show where I suddenly realized, oh, crap, I need walls because you zip this thing shut and you walk away because there's security at night and you come back the next day. So a lot of it was sort of like trial and error process, and people were like, being, as I said, very generous with their experience and kind of going, oh, here's what worked for me. So consequently, if I know someone who's doing it for the first time, like vendors at our farmers market, I was like, oh, here's what worked for me. You might try this and that, because to me, it's like, you got to kind of pay it forward because someone took the time to walk me through that. In the same way, like someone sat down with me when I first set up my Etsy shop, she had an embroidery business with friends of my wife, and she goes, here, let me sit you down, and here's how I set up my Etsy. Here's how I do the hashtags. Here's birth to death of an order. Here's what I did to set it up. And so,
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the outdoor shows, like you said, there's the whole element of weather is a whole thing. Weighting the tent down is a big thing, and I find I did a lot of shows that were indoors where you just have a table, and so you just need to know as far as merchandising something on a 6-foot table. But then if you're doing an outdoor show with a tent and you're hanging things from the tent, maybe it's just the amount that you have to plan and think about and the logistics of it is just far and away.
Weights, zip ties, and bungee cords become very good friends of yours.
And just what you're using to hang your things up, like do you have grid walls or the walls of the it becomes very expensive. It's a whole, if you're going to do it, you have to dive in and really buy a lot of equipment and assume you're going to use it a lot.
Thankfully the stuff that I had was a combination between stuff that I got and stuff that sometimes people were like going, oh, here, you can borrow this when I was first starting out, because I'm not using it that much, or I'm not doing many shows, or
that is really
another
nice.
vendor suggests something that worked really well for them, and I'm like, oh. And then there's other stuff where you just walk around and look at other vendors and you'll go, oh, I never thought I could do that with that thing. That's a cool idea. I should do that instead.
I came up with so I feel like the tip that took me years to come up with, but if you're in an outdoor show and there's wind coming through, I have this little vertical, almost like this, it looks like stair steps where you have a bunch of greeting cards up, a little display for cards. And your greeting cards are light, and depending on the angle of the wind coming through, sometimes a gust comes through and just all your cards start blowing down the road, and everybody goes, oh, and everybody's bending and crouching and picking up your greeting cards running down the road. And I finally realized if the card at the back of the stack, I just tape that one down to the stand, and then that one doesn't blow forward. It doesn't knock all the other ones off.
It doesn't flip everyone thing out.
Yeah, and so they all stay up. That helps a lot. Just taping one card to the stand helps them not all cacophony off.
No, I ended up like my bookmarks. I used to set them. Used to have like a little pegboard that I would put on an easel, which is little hooks, and then the wind comes through, it blows all the bookmarks off.
Yeah.
So finally, I got this like freestanding little grid wall with like little legs, and I bought these little toothed like clips from IKEA that have like a little loop on the backside.
I know those clips.
So I crimped the top of those, so the clips are now kind of crimped onto the grid wall, so they're a permanent
so they
bit
don't
of it.
move. Yeah.
So then because I clip it to the top of the bookmarks, it can blow all day, and the bookmarks, I got to flip the bookmarks back into place, but they're never going to go flying everywhere.
It's crazy how much you have to
there's all the logistics you have to consider.
I did the Isle of Hope fair a few weeks ago, which was amazing, and it was this great turnout, but it was much windier than I think any of us were anticipating. And I was there's different areas where you can be, and I was on Bluff Drive, which luckily there's this big like iron, like heavy duty metal fence behind all the vendors. Right. And we all, one by one, we had ropes, and we were tying our tent to this fence to make sure that it wasn't blowing away. And that was amazing that fence happened to be present, because it was better than any weights everywhere.
Yeah.
But we all were literally just tied to this fence.
Oh, that's good to have.
It was windy. It was on the water.
I did one I would do St. Simon's regularly, and we had one where it was a gale force wind advisory, so you had like 30, 40 mile an hour winds were coming up, and almost all the vendors, because they're all weighted, they had one arm up holding the middle section. We all look like standing subway riders holding on to that little
exactly.
handle.
It's the worst feeling when you, like, people are trying to shop in your booth, and you're just like so tense, and a wind is coming through, and you're holding on to your tent, and you're like with your hand on some of your products, and you're trying to smile and be nice and talk to people shopping, but inside you're like, oh my god, my entire situation is blowing away.
Yeah. And you've seen like one or two vendor tents meet a horrible end just recently in the wind, and you're just like, oh my god, this could be
sometimes the entire tent can go. I've been in shows where like maybe a ceramicist or somebody who has plants, maybe a whole display of theirs blew over, and then like a bunch of their product crashes, and it is awful.
Yeah, I had a glass framed example of my dog portraits that died a horrible death, and then my response to that after, it thankfully didn't hurt the piece. I just cleaned the glass out, and then I had an extra piece of plexi, so that's now the cover to that thing.
Yeah.
So if it flips over, I feel like, okay, the plexi's not going to go
I feel
anywhere.
like all these things that you learn is because something terrible happened and you had to come up with a fix.
I think that in some ways that's almost the only way to learn, because it is a trial and error process. So,
Let's see. So the St. Simon show, that's interesting. That one it's a full weekend when you do that, right?
Yeah, it's usually one, depending upon the time of year, it's typically just Saturday and Sunday once a month. That's crafts in the village is the event that they do.
Is that mostly tourists who go there, or people who live in that area?
Both, actually.
Yeah.
So I've gotten a lot of tourist people that have bought stuff. I actually sold 2 paintings to one lady that lived down the street, and she was a mystery crime novelist. Oh. So she asked me.
Do we know her name? Can you share her name?
No, I off the top of my head I don't remember. So my apologies, I cannot shout out. But when she had walked to the market, so she bought 2 paintings. She goes, "Can you wrap these up, and I'll come back, and I'll just bring my car back to grab them, because it's kind of gray, it might rain, I don't want to get on the paintings." When she came back, she actually brought me one of her, like the 3rd novel in a series, which was amazing. Then I'm going, I sold a painting to someone that's going to hang in their writings in the office they use for their writing.
Will inspire
and
her for her crime.
And they brought me a book, and I don't know if the pieces would inspire for crime, because they were fairly sedate.
I guess it wasn't that one of the voodoo doll.
No, it wasn't the voodoo doll. It wasn't the one that's like going, oh, I'd like to take the one with lots of skulls on it, or no.
That's cool. You have to tell me it later. Look up who that mystery novelist, and we'll stick it in the liner notes, because that sounds interesting. I love the idea. Also, I love that there's a novelist kind of in the area.
Yeah, I'll have to pull out the book off my bookshelf and message you.
What is there any, like, what's sort of the wildest or most surprising thing that a customer has said to you while you've been doing these in-person shows?
You also have people randomly kind of telling you, hey, here's what you know what? I'm just giving you advice here. Here's what you should paint.
Yeah.
I think every one of us as artists have gotten that.
Or they're looking at your body of work, and they're like, have you ever considered doing X, Y, Z? Something different.
I had someone slam was like, you've got. Do you have trout? I want a trout painting.
Yes,
Can
those
you
are people who have a particular animal that they are on the hunt
I was
for.
like, I unfortunately don't do trouts. You should do trouts.
Yeah, I find also the people who make suggestions like that of asking you to do a particular thing, if you do it and then you contact them, they always are like, looks great, and then that's it. They don't actually buy it.
Well, it's like the people that walk past every artist booth and it's like, oh, nice work, keep it up. And you're like,
The keep it up drives me crazy. Keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, thank you. I am going to keep going. This is my entire job. I will definitely keep going.
There was a quote I'd read. I can't remember who to attribute it to, but they had made the comments like that they feel that it's a human need to make something because if you look at cave paintings where someone living a desperate life where lots of things much bigger than us are going to probably eat us, someone is still taking the time to make some form of paint out of plant pigments to put their mark on a wall to represent the world. There's got to be some just need as people for us to convey a version of our world that we interpret.
Literally making your mark.
Yeah, literally.
I guess that's how we have an idea of what the animals that were chasing and eating people back then looked like, because they painted it on cave walls, right? Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so I'd love to talk a little bit about how you have come up with the way that you balance out your business of like time management sort of how you have these commissions coming in, you have work at various shops and galleries, you're doing these in-person shows. Are you just sort of like
working all the time?
Well, are you very planned out and looking ahead and really mapping things out, or is every day and every week just sort of like, okay, here's what I have to cover now?
It's a mixed bag actually. So in some ways I've got I know what shows I'm going to be doing, so because that has to be planned on my calendar, so I know where I'm going to be and when I'm going to be.
Yeah.
I try to plan out times that I can make it to galleries or shops to replenish my work, which also necessitates me planning out time ahead of time to print new stuff or make new stuff. But then I've also, as a creative, I have to build in some like time where I just get to play. Because in as much as I'll have a lot of commission work, I've also sold a lot of original pieces that were simply me, for lack of, not to knock my work, but I'm screwing around with paint on a canvas. And
these would be like your skyscape, the landscape.
Yeah, there's stuff I've done that are they're just grand experiments of like, oh, let's try this. Or I saw another artist do something, or consumed a YouTube video that went, oh, that's neat. Let me try that, because I'm very much I'm kind of a joke. There was inside joke with my sister and I. That's why the name Art Monkey popped up, because I'm just a monkey screwing around with stuff. I'm just a monkey playing around with things. And so Art Monkey 16 on my Instagram was simply because 16 was the year that I started on Instagram, and Art Monkey was just once again an inside joke with my sister and I. Yeah, and it was just like, you know.
So recently you started teaching some adult watercolor classes, right? In the last few months?
I did.
How did that come about?
Well, I'd had a thought of teaching classes, and some of my fellow artists had been seeing my watercolor work and the bookmarks and other things I did, and was like, oh, you should really I'd love to see your technique on that, because they'd see me sometimes do time lapse on my Instagram or Facebook.
Okay.
And
it sounds like you were painting at your shows too, which not everybody
does.
I
paint watercolors at my shows. Yeah,
so
cool. Because that's something I can start and stop. And it doesn't matter if the paint dries, I can just reactivate it with a little water, so it's not a big deal. But so they wanted to do that, and actually even Heather had mentioned that, because I was showing her, we were doing she was interviewing me for Reflections magazine.
Okay. Heather Young.
Yeah, Heather Young, and she had suggested, she's like, oh, you really want to do the classes? So I was like, well, let's put together the class idea and do those, and did my first one probably about, I can't remember, I think it was like September maybe is when I started my first one, and that was a 4-week course, like 1 day a week, for like 2 hours.
How did you market that?
Mainly through Facebook. Put it out in the community. Put it on the Arts on the Coast page.
Okay.
I put it out on the Richmond Hill community page. I put it out on because there's a private page for the subdivision I live in.
Yeah.
So I put it out to those folks, and then fellow artists that I knew would share it and put the word out. So I ended up with 6 students my first class.
Okay.
And then when that first beginner class was done, all of them wanted to continue on to some capacity. 2 of them, their schedule, it didn't work out, so they'll maybe join for some intermediate class when we get into the first part of the next year.
Yeah.
But 4 of the other students were like, well, let's continue on. So I then was like, well,
just
instead of
rolled
doing another
into the
beginner
next
class,
class,
I'll roll into an intermediate class.
How did you, for both that one and then the one you're doing now, how did you come up with like your kind of curriculum, like how you were going to teach?
Some of it was because there's an online thing called Domestika, and I tend to take classes from Domestika, and I've noticed that all their classes start with the same structure of, here's an introduction of me as an artist, here's my inspiration and things that got me going or inspired me, here's all my tools and materials, and then let's start out with the basics of how I use these materials. And almost all the videos have some structure like that, and I was like, oh, well, I can just, that's a good basic curriculum structure, so I'll crib some of that from there. And so I started with, like, I laid out all my tools and materials, but then when we got into the class itself, it's like, okay, here is a simple pan of 8 colors of watercolor. Here's the basic range of 5 brushes. I'm using the exact same brushes for all the demos. I'm using the exact same paint, but I showed them additional stuff and additional paper and things like that for watercolors.
Interesting. And the class, you said they were taking place at the
Arts on the Arts on the Coast Gallery.
Okay.
Yeah, and I kicked back a percentage of the class fee to Arts on the Coast as a, hey, I'm using the space.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's done in the auspices of the Arts on the Coast event. So you mentioned before, and this is so interesting, that like coming up with how to teach a class, it really makes you have to crystallize in your head, like to put your technique into words. So how did that process go for you? Well, I had taught once before. Someone came to my house probably once a week to learn oil painting, and that was just a single student who had reached out to me and wanted classes to learn how to oil paint. So I had done a little bit of that, but that was like 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
But going through and actually, because there's stuff you do as an artist that you just don't think about. This is just what you do.
Yeah.
And then you had to verbalize, well, why am I doing this? And there's sort of a certain amount of self-analysis that's like, oh, well, I'm adding this splash of this color here because that I'm picking up a tone that I had in here to balance the painting out.
Yeah, and it's mostly all, like we were talking about earlier, just reactions to things you've done before that didn't work out well. And now you just come up with a way to fix it, but you're not used to explaining all of that steps to people. You're just like, well, I do this, and then when they ask you, you have to explain like, well, I'm saving you some time, or else you could make the same mistakes I did.
Yeah, and also I think verbalizing that to the students of like, oh, I'm doing this because of this reason.
Yeah.
This is how I fix. And I also try to spend a lot of time on how to fix if something goes sideways, which happens.
That's true.
And also the other thing is for that beginner class impression upon, like, I'm showing you what works for me, but this is broad range, these are techniques. You're going to find things that are going to work for you. You may handle the paint slightly differently. You're going to handle the brush. This is giving you the starting points to go from there to then decide, oh, well, this is going to work well for me. This is a technique I'm going to try. This is a style I'm going to go with. These are colors I want to use. But to just give them a starting spot, because I think for a lot of beginners for art, it's well, how do I begin?
Yeah.
Because that can be something of the daunting part of it.
Yeah, and they're just scared to start and mess something up, and just to give them the freedom to be like, even if you're working on something you really like, if you do a little mistake, there are ways to fix it, because even really seasoned artists are making mistakes all the time.
Yeah, you just don't cover it, or it's simply well, of course I meant to do that.
I do a lot of, I have an X-Acto knife, and if it's a small enough area, that I'll just like scratch off the surface really lightly.
I've done that to do that, especially if it's ink work.
Yeah.
If I've done ink work, a little X-Acto to get the ink off.
Yeah.
Apparently, what I've learned that just recently from like a YouTube video for techniques, you can actually pull up some watercolor with like a magic eraser, like. One of those like the ones you use for cleaning,
like a house,
like a cleaning, the clean magic eraser where it's like Mr. Clean.
That's cool.
Apparently, I tried that out and was like, oh, well, that actually worked. So
you can also, I guess, like if it's watercolor on either paper or panel, depending on, you can maybe wet the brush a lot and rub the brush into it, and then you can kind of, like you said, reactivate the paint and then like dab it.
Yeah, I've done that where I've done like, okay,
sometimes
wet dab, and you pull up a good chunk of the color, and then you can go on top of it with something else. Yeah, because I've done stuff where I've gone back and fixed something that I just wasn't quite happy with.
Yeah.
Some things are not fixable, and just kind of like going, well, this is what it is.
Yeah, I will say I used to just work in, I would be working really small, and it would be on either paper or small panels because I was just doing pen and ink.
Yeah.
And I kind of, during the pandemic, just had all this time and space and transitioned into doing bigger on canvases and doing actual paint, not just ink. And then that opened up a lot because then if you make a mistake, you can just like put some really opaque white acrylic paint over the mistake and literally just paint over top of it.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Like in pen and ink and watercolor, you kind of can't cover something with white paint because then trying to ink on top of that paint looks completely different.
Yeah, because then it ends that like that kind of that
It's a whole
chalky
different
line
texture.
and the texture.
Yeah,
weird.
so having
Yeah.
transitioned to working with paint on canvas, it opens up a lot of extra mistake fix
When you
opportunities.
when you do ink work with watercolor, do you start out with the ink or do you add the ink after you've done the watercolor?
I think I would usually do the pencil sketch first and then the inking and then do the watercolor
Okay.
in the end.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those, and it used to just be working on paper, and then kind of like at some point that ampersand company came out with this panel, like it's like a new technology where they have a certain panel where the surface of it mimics watercolor paper.
Yeah.
So it's good for ink and watercolor,
Yeah.
but it's, you know, it's solid. So you actually can scratch things up with a pen a lot easier than on a piece of paper. If you're going to use like an X-Acto knife and scratch things up, you have to be so delicate.
This is why if you think you're going to do, if I think I'm
tear
going to
through
do a
the
lot of that,
paper.
I'm going with 300-pound watercolor
But,
paper.
yeah.
Because I can like beat that stuff up pretty well.
But yeah, if you ever try, there's this ampersand panel where the surface of it is like watercolor, and then you know, you're not going to scratch through a panel. It's amazing.
Have you ever tried out the watercolor ground that Daniel Smith makes? You can put that on canvas like gesso.
No.
Yeah, I saw someone that tried that, and I was like, well, let's.
Was it you paint it on and then it dries?
Yeah,
to
you brush
feel
it on like you would
watercolor?
gesso, and you do like 1 to 3 layers, and it provides a little bit of a ground, so you can actually soak in
Wow.
that. I'll have sometime later over the weekend. I'll message you one of the images that I did. That's on. I've got 2 paintings of. They're on small canvases that are watercolor.
That is very cool.
I'll send the images to you.
Thank you for the tip.
Sure.
I feel like I'm getting the benefit of your teaching right now. Do you have any kind of words of wisdom for anybody else who's looking to get into freelance art teaching?
Oh, I think the big thing is you probably know more than you think you know, and I encourage people if they're thinking about teaching, just to try it, because there's a lot of fear with like, oh, well, what if I doing it wrong? What am I telling them? And that's why it's like I tell my students, I'm like, this is what works for me personally.
Yeah.
I'm more imparting tools and techniques and ideas. And then from there, I'm constantly experimenting, trying new stuff. So at least I'm giving you an idea to try that. So I think getting out there and just doing it, and even if you do it once or twice, you'll learn something about your own process, maybe.
Yeah,
and
sure.
that might, even if you don't teach anymore after that, you're going to learn something from it about yourself.
Great. Well, thank you. I have a few questions at the end I like to ask. It's our Inside the Actor Studio section.
Very cool.
Okay,
All right.
so is there a particular book that speaks to you?
Steal Like an Artist is a really good one to read for
Oh, I think
anybody.
somebody else,
Steal
I
Like
think,
an
has
Artist
suggested that too.
that is a great one. Years ago, there was a guy I worked with that had recommended a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and I think I'm mispronouncing. My Spanish is bad on his name, but that very much dealt with kind of the finding your path, and sometimes your path is right in front of you, you don't realize it, so that's, I would point that, very much so.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has been Paul Downs, local artist. I will post links in our show notes, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me. This has been awesome.
Here are a couple of creative events coming up over the next week. On Thursday the 8th from 12:30 to 1:30 at the Savannah Culture Arts Center, they are doing a nonprofit panel. They're inviting new and emerging nonprofits and individuals thinking about starting a nonprofit, especially if you're focusing on arts and culture, invited to join them at an open panel discussion with local nonprofit leaders. And then Saturday, December 10th from 6 to 9 p.m., Picker Joe is having their annual Christmas party, and it benefits Coastal Pet Rescue. There's a $10 suggested donation. They're going to have an awesome local musician, Trey Gurley, and his band. And just a reminder, starting now, the show is moving to every other week. So we are today, the first Wednesday of the month, and then we're going to be again on the third Wednesday of the month. Up next on WRUU, That Old Savannah Magic from 4 to 6 p.m., a variety show featuring Savannah history, radio theater, interviews, and music.
You are listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.